We have a relatively short agenda today. We'll have the call to order, a consent agenda, solid waste and recycling, rate increase, and that's going to be a hearing. So if you have comments on that, please fill out a form and give it to Julie. And then we'll have a briefing on the enhanced transit corridors and then adjourn with the target being 2:15. So start out with items of interest from commissioners. Anyone? Joe, do you have a director's report?
I do. So two items. One is just letting the commission know that Ben's agreed to be the commission representative to the Airport Futures Oversight Group that meets quarterly to monitor sort of changes and progress at the airport and the implementation of the Airport Futures Plan. So I appreciate him agreeing to do that. And secondly, as part of or during the budget advisory committee process, Hila and I were talking about how to create space for the Planning and Sustainability Commission to understand our work program as it's sort of evolving and developing, and also promote or suggest ideas for projects or issues or things to be addressed as part of the future work programs. And it was interesting discussion in the Budget Advisory Committee because the pushback it was really interesting about access to why would the Budget Advisory Committee have access to be able to suggest ideas and not a broader public and the like. The PSC is different because you're an appointed body with citywide responsibilities that puts in a great deal of time and is immersed in these issues. So tapping into just sort of what you're seeing or what you're thinking about in terms of what could be work program related items and making sure that you're understanding at least the thinking behind the work program that we're building seemed really appropriate. So we want to make that space. And bring that to a future Planning and Sustainability Commission meeting. We're thinking about an hour, sort of open format I guess there'll be a certain amount of telling you about our current program, but mostly it's an opportunity for discussion. It's rather than a presentation to you. And as we're looking at the agendas and when you have time for this kind of discussion, we're thinking it's sometime in July. You're about to go into the extensive deliberations on residential infill project and on better housing by design. So that's going to take up a lot of your agenda space in between. And then the brainstorming of ideas is to create that opportunity to tap into what you're seeing and what you're thinking, but also to create an opportunity to get some of these things that you feel are important into the work program. So it's not just brainstorming for the benefit of brainstorming. And so what doing it in July allows us to do is we have to hold ourselves accountable to checking the work program that we build in terms of its equity implications and in alignment with sort of other priorities in the comprehensive plan and the like. So this allows us to bring that back to you, and we can take a look at the whole package in that context.
Mike?
Is that, Eli, you want to add anything? Or? Sorry.
My only addition would be, when I mentioned the 1 hour, I thought maybe we would just toss it in one of these really short-term meetings. I think that we should have at least 1 hour time for commissioners speaking independent of whatever staff does, because sometimes that is great stuff, but it eats up time. Thanks.
And I'm wondering if there'll be an opportunity leading up to that to have an idea of what the work plan is and for us to be thinking, because an hour will go very quickly.
Okay. Yeah. So if we could get as much of that done in advance by written materials, then we don't have to eat up as much time.
Sure. I had a question. I don't remember the answer. Do we have a commissioner on the Budget Advisory Committee?
Yes.
That's Eli. Okay.
Yeah, I was this year, and I was. It was eye-opening how small of a band of decision-making priorities was being recommended on, being asked of us to recommend on in the meeting. So I felt afterwards that it might be valuable for us to have a time to brainstorm as a group.
When you say small, you mean there was not a wide-ranging discussion at the Budget Advisory Committee, or what? I guess I'm curious, how is it teed up for the Budget Advisory Committee? I mean, what are they asked to opine on?
I'll let Joe answer that one, I guess.
We have it's the Budget Advisory Committee advises the Bureau on the use of our general fund part of the budget. And within that, also, we typically had, this year we had budget instructions from the mayor and budget office to propose 5% cuts. So we have to go through this scenario of taking a look at the work program. Within that work program, what do we feel like we have the ability to change, or which things, like we're finishing a project, so they really are not so on the table for discussion. And then amongst those priorities that we do have the ability to change, what some options are about what we try to do, what we have to cut, what the implications of that are.
And in practice, what that looked like is over how many, I don't know how many $1 million budget the agency has, but there was the staff provided a proposal of about 3 items that could be added on if there's additional funds, and a few items that might get cut if there was insufficient funds. And that was the focus of the discussion, was just whether we want to support recommendations or adjust recommendations among those items. So it did feel, as a participant, as a we didn't have the time to really look at the budget more broadly, and we were being asked for a pretty narrow wedge of it to opine on it. So as I and others brought up ideas for bigger picture ideas, what would be work plan, that kind of stuff, the feedback was, well, how representative is this group, and and that's beyond the scope of 3 half-hour meetings. So it felt like it wasn't really, although I thought it was a forum for proposing or discussing general priorities and writing that into budget. I can't say from my own experience that it felt much like that. So I hope that there could be some other forum where we could weigh in that way, which is the genesis of this idea.
Thank you for that effort. I think that's consistent with kind of the thought that was raised at our retreat earlier this year, that we should have a process by which we can get our hands on helping staff or working with staff to think through what our priorities might be and how that affects it. And I think I went away a little misunderstanding. I thought that was the budget advisory process, but now I understand that's not really the budget advisory process. So I would just echo everything we were saying today. I hope we have ample time in July, both for staff to present, but also for sort of an internal discussion amongst the commissioners about prioritization and how we can perhaps get our hands a little bit more on setting policy direction. So I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
And I assume in the limited staff presentation we get, or the preliminary materials, it'll sort of explain how the budget's generally set up and what's funded by grants and what's general fund, just because there are going to be constraints on the resources.
We will, yes, that's typically, we need to provide that context.
Yes.
More comment. I think I may have mentioned this before, but there's the work plan and the budget process that determines the priorities. We as a commission can operate outside of this venue as well, as I understand it, in terms of if there was a policy issue something we felt really strongly about. There are other opportunities, I would think, by calling in outside experts, for example, to address a particular problem, which might inform council or staff that there's a certain way we could go with a particular issue, whether it's transportation or green spaces or whatever. So that's how I'm thinking. In addition to this more focused opportunity, there may be other ways that we can, by bringing in outside experts or forming something ourselves, have input as well in different ways within the city. Like we've had significant advances, for example, just taking stormwater management by bringing like 700 people to Portland for 5 days with experts sharing with city staff best practices, and that had a significant impact in terms of how the Bureau of Environmental Services deals with stormwater that we would not deal with here, but has had a big impact in the city.
Okay, I think we have all the comments. Thank you. So we have the consent agenda. The only item there is consideration of the minutes from March 27th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. The next item is the solid waste and recycling rate increase hearing. We'll hear from staff. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Rudd, Commission members, I'm Bruce Walker. I'm the Solid Waste and Recycling Program Manager for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Every year, our Bureau sets rates for curbside, residential garbage, recycling, and composting collection service. You've received a memo last Friday that summarized the factors affecting Portland's program and recommending changes to rates. For those in the audience, I will cover key points in that memo in a brief presentation. The recommended rate increase is $2.55 per month for almost all households to take effect on May 1st this year. BPS regulates a dozen franchise companies that provide the residential garbage, recycling, and composting curbside collection service to single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. You'll notice this residential collection truck has been retrofitted with side guards as part of a BPS Vision Zero pilot project along with Portland haulers. These side guards are designed to reduce the risk of injury to cyclists or pedestrians in case of a side impact collision. You'll see the two white boards installed on this truck that prevent anyone from going between the axles and get hit by the rear wheels. So I just wanted to share that. This is one of our franchise trucks that's out there. That was an aside. So back to the rate review. Each year, BPS conducts a thorough analysis of costs providing curbside service. We contract with an independent CPA to review each garbage and recycling company's financial records. Thanks to their excellent recycling and composting habits, Portlanders have kept solid waste rates low for many years. Recent rates have stayed relatively steady, with 2 years of rate decreases, 2 years of rates staying flat, and last year we had a rate increase of 10 cents per household per month. As we discussed at your last meeting, the primary reason for the rate increase is due to unprecedented recycling market conditions that have impacted recyclers worldwide. Recyclable materials are a commodity used by manufacturers throughout the world. When recyclables are used, to make new products, it reduces the use of natural resources and saves energy and water in the manufacturing process. While many Oregon and Pacific Northwest manufacturers use recyclable materials, unsorted paper and plastics are primarily exported to China for manufacturing there. China has recently adopted broad environmental and economic policies aimed at reducing environmental impacts in their country. As part of these measures, China notified recycling companies around the world that they will only be importing recyclable materials that meet unexpectedly high quality standards. These new higher standards require recycling facilities to slow their sorting lines and hire more people to further sort the materials in order for them to be successfully marketed to manufacturers in China and elsewhere. These steps have significantly increased facility operating costs. Beginning last fall, the fees that garbage and recycling companies in Portland paid to drop off recyclables at sorting facilities reached record high levels. These high costs are not covered in the current rates. I also want to mention other factors putting upward pressure on the rates. Inflation has increased labor and fuel costs for haulers, and disposal fees levied by Metro on garbage disposed at the regional transfer stations have also increased. As you can see in the rate components for the 35-gallon cart, that's the most commonly used service level we have here in Portland, that as you can see, the recycling costs represent about 75% of the proposed rate increase. Looking back a few years, revenue from the sale of recyclables helped offset these increases in the other rate components. However, due to the recycling market conditions I just mentioned, substantial costs have been added to our system. Typically, cost increases associated with new truck purchases, for example, are planned for and they're gradual enough to include in our new rates that would begin on July 1st. But due to the urgent nature of the current recycling market conditions, the City of Portland is moving this process forward to get new rates in place by May 1st. Once the cost of service rates are determined, incentive discounts are applied to smaller garbage carts and incentive premiums to larger garbage carts in order to encourage customers to reduce their garbage generation and to compost and recycle as much as possible. This year, the incentive discounts and premiums proposed remain mostly the same in the current rates. We did add an incentive discount for the 35-gallon roll cart, and an incentive premium to the 32-gallon can. That step sets those services at the same rate as our program moves to a fully carted system. Although this is a significant rate increase relative to previous system costs, it is still below the rates that where rates would be if we had just adjusted for inflation since 2012. The upward pressure is also affecting other metro jurisdictions such as Gresham, Hillsborough, and Washington and Clackamas counties, all of which are working on expedited rate review processes just like Portland. In the broader scheme, BPS is working in collaboration with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Metro, recycling facilities, and garbage and recycling companies to determine the best course of action for long-term solution to some of the recycling market issues. To wrap up, we have a great system in place in Portland, and Portlanders can be proud of it. We have achieved one of the best recycling levels in the nation, and we don't want to interrupt that daily habit. After your commission considers audience testimony, we will request that you forward a recommendation on rates to City Council. This topic is on the council agenda for April 18th to allow the rates to change by May 1st. Thank you for your time. I'm able to answer any questions you have now, or if you'd rather consider testimony.
Any questions from the commission at this point? Yes, Chris?
Just want to understand the recycling ecosystem a little bit. Do the haulers also provide sorting services, or is that an entirely different entity and they just drop off the mixed recycling?
That's an excellent question. The haulers deliver to other privately owned facilities. It's not, in general, there's one smaller facility that works primarily with its own material or generated from its own routes. But the vast majority of the recyclable materials are delivered to facilities owned and operated by other private entities.
Yes, Mike?
Yeah, I must not be remembering correctly. I thought the increase last time you gave a presentation was on the order of $3. Has it been reduced, or is that?
No, your memory is correct. When we were here last time, our best estimate at that time, before we had the fully reviewed item or financial reports from the haulers, it was around $3. The refined amount is $2.55 per month.
So I'll repeat a question since she's not here. Our chair raised the issue of better educating the public so that they're doing a better job. I can't remember whether you committed to that or to think about it. I'm just wondering if there's some small, minute amount of the increase that might be directed toward getting people to do a better job of sorting themselves.
So the recycling sorting issue is a priority of ours in terms of getting messaging out. We believe we have the necessary budget and will allocate our outreach activities to that. We are planning, well, first of all, there's a mailing going out just about the rate increase after council takes action. But in June, we're going to be sending our curbsider with more detailed information to reinforce some of the sorting messages. And then we're taking some additional steps in terms of not just traditional print information that I've described, but we're revamping our messaging online, as well as some items that were brought up last time about the email reminder. And the good news is we've gotten okay in coordination with our the citywide Bureau of Technology Services. So we are going to upgrade that collection reminder. So I appreciate that suggestion, and it's spurred us to move to do some other messaging in there. And what we intend to, or what I've recommended that to our communications team, that will focus on select items such as the plastic clamshell or the coffee cup, soda cup. That doesn't belong in our recycling cart. So yes, we intend to spend more time working not only with the outreach efforts, but also there'll be some feedback responsibilities from the haulers if they see some of those the collections that they provide have too much of the wrong material.
Great, thanks.
Andre?
The 32 gallon and the 35 gallon. So is the idea to
unless someone really wants a 32 gallon to automatically switch them over to the more efficient 35?
Our
I mean,
goal,
it's the same cost for them now, so I'm trying to figure out why we would not.
yes, it would be preferred that customers switch to a 35-gallon cart. It will promote efficiency and safety in the system when it gets away from haulers doing more lifting on route and emptying the cans in the truck. So there remain 9% of the customer base in the 32-gallon can, and we are striving to. And one other thing, new customers haven't been able to sign up for a 32-gallon can for about 5 years.
Okay.
So, yes, that's our intention, is to move that direction.
Okay, but we're not taking the step of making it a default, and so people just get a notice and move, because it's the same cost now.
It will be the same cost. Council approves, if council approves these
it, yeah.
rates, and that we would be giving notification to those customers to that they would be able to have that 35 cart.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Eli?
I'm going to see if I understand the finance side of this. If so, we regulate the rates, obviously, or recommendations on it, and then the franchises are regulated based on some projective return. So
Correct.
if we were to, just for thought experiment, if we were to raise rates by, $5 a container, then that would be a short term at least, and the actual the actual cost for the hauler of selling the stuff is less than that, then they would make money on that. If we regulated the cost lower or left them as is, and the haulers have to dispose of it at a higher cost, and they're going to lose money on it. So I guess I'm checking to see if this bears on the balance sheet of the haulers, or whether they just pass through whatever it is and doesn't have an impact.
So I'm not certain I understand fully the question, but let me try to reply. So we established rates last year at this time that went into effect that did not have the substantial cost increase that the haulers experienced on the recycling side. So that means that they're in effect earning less than is in the franchise agreement and is the target of the program. There have been considerable concerns voiced about that gap because of the substantial increases in that cost line item. But we do not adjust on a monthly basis. That the system is based on an annual rate review process.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just to piggyback on Eli's question, so the rates as proposed is basically taking into account the increase in cost of sorting and disposing of all the materials in the recycling, but it's not intended to create any buffer or to compensate on any losses that have been occurred in the last year or so since the market has changed.
I'll answer that last one. There's no going backwards to do a payback, if you will. We are doing our best estimate providing with the provided information we've received from recycling facilities and anticipated market prices, but there's not really a big, there's no buffer that we purposely put into it.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any more questions at this point, thank you. We'll have you come back after the public testimony. Now opening the public hearing, I have one slip of paper from Beth Vargas Duncan. So please come up and state your name and give your testimony. And if anyone else would like to provide comment at this point, please fill out a form and give it to Julie at the end of the semicircle.
Vargas Duncan with Oregon Refuse and Recycling Association, Chair Rudd, members of the commission. I'm very pleased to be here. Very pleased to be here as early as I am. Staff is to be commended for all of their work in helping us work together, exchange a lot of information, data, have many, many hours of conversations to bring us to this point so there's full understanding on both sides. So I want to mention, as Bruce already has, that we have 12 privately owned haulers, and each one of those haulers are a member of the Portland Haulers Association that I am representing here today. So Bruce already mentioned what has happened and why we're here addressing this issue. China has tightened their policies considerably, and that has changed how we are handling material that we receive or put into the blue carts, our commingled recycling at our residential areas. So right now, what has happened is there's a number of items that are no longer marketed in the same way, and the cost of accepting them has increased significantly. Processors here have had to add staff, slow their sorting processes, store materials, and search for new markets for these recycled materials. Each of these activities add cost to the process of sorting and handling, managing those recycled materials. Over the past 6 months, the cost for haulers to drop off their recycling materials for processing has rapidly increased, about fourfold. At the current rate, it's more cost effective to actually landfill these recycled materials than to have them processed. But the Portland haulers do not want this option, if at all possible. So, what are we doing? We are working very collaboratively with all the folks in Oregon and outside actually. So we have continuous collaboration among the processors, haulers, local governments, the Oregon DEQ, and other stakeholders. We're working to identify methods to keep our costs down, minimize or maximize recycling of the material, and minimize any chance that they would be landfilled, both in the short and the long term. So what now? This expedited rate review process and the rate adjustment will help the haulers successfully manage the costs related to these unprecedented challenges and continue to fulfill their recycling services to Portland residential customers. With the Planning and Sustainability Commission's support and the City Council's passage of this expedited rate adjustment, the need for a larger increase later would be minimized. This in turn will help solid waste customers better handle these additional costs and the haulers to successfully manage these challenges. Our call to action is, we know Oregonians lead the nation in recycling. Now, these changes in the market mean that Oregon shall continue to lead the way, but in order to do so, we must adapt to these changes. There's a shared responsibility, and if Oregonians continue to put materials that are not recyclable into their blue carts, the curbside bin, the costs will continue to go up, and recycling and recovery rates may not improve. The change in the market is a call to action for all of us to improve even more and seek the latest information on what's recyclable and what should not be in the cart, to put garbage in the garbage bin and reduce contaminants. We don't want to make our recycling material garbage. Create clean streams that can be sold in the market and processed for reuse into new products. For many decades, the Portland haulers have demonstrated a strong commitment to providing excellent service to the residents of Portland, while also producing sustainable results and consistent operational safety. We look forward to partnering with the city in the future, and the Portland Haulers Association appreciates the opportunity to serve Portland. We ask that you support staff's proposal and forward a related recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you for being here and helping us. I'm wondering if you could help us with some information on some things we should try to eliminate from the waste stream. Maybe the top 5, maybe they're clamshells, I don't know. And maybe we can have a little war on even having them come into the waste stream.
You would think that'd be an easy answer, but that is part of the topics across the state. But obviously, the place to start are the things that never should have been there in the first place, which are the plastic, takeout food kind of containers, the clamshells, things that Bruce mentioned, your soda and coffee cups, those things that are seen. Any amount of garbage really needs to be put into the garbage bin, not the recycled blue cart. Other parts of the state are looking at other plastics, really honestly 3 through 7 plastic, where they may be having a harder time finding a market for that, and asking, at least for the time being, that those items not go into the blue cart. That is not the case in Oregon. I don't want to confuse anyone. I mean, in Portland, that's right now we're working to continue with the same practice that folks have been accustomed to doing in Portland, and hope to find markets to move all the materials.
Okay. Chris?
Back to trying to understand the ecosystem better. So your members are delivering to the sorting facilities. I assume those are all free market private enterprise businesses. Is that correct?
Yes.
They're not regulated. So they've been free to change their prices in response to the change in the downstream market. So am I correct in believe, and I'm curious if, I'm trying to figure out who's eating the change here, if it's all falling on your haulers or if the sorting facilities are absorbing part of it, or how is the change getting passed along?
So it is a fluid system, Commissioner. You are correct that the processors are private. They are not rate regulated in the same way that the franchise residential collection haulers are. So you're correct that the franchised collection haulers here in Portland are not able to change the rates without an action by the city. And so when their costs go up, whether it be from the processor or a landfill, then they need to operate within the costs that they have been provided by the city. And so that is why we've engaged in this conversation, exchange of detailed data, and have arrived at where staff has presented today.
Okay. And in terms of the contamination rate, China has set this very high bar of 0.5%. And my understanding is even when we separated at the curb, we never got better than 5%. So I'm just trying to imagine how we close that gap. I guess we can hope that markets other than China evolve that don't require that bar. Maybe that's one outcome. But is there some radical reform of our system going to be needed in order to continue to have viable markets for the material?
Well, starting with the easiest is to have people, to feel okay about putting things that they know are not recyclable into the garbage.
Right.
That's a big step for Oregonians. I know that because we think before we place an item where it goes. So that's the first step. And then the next would be to look longer term. And these are where we're having these conversations with the DEQ, the processors. Processors are working very hard to find new markets for the materials. And the cleaner the stream, the easier it is to find those markets.
And I understand that the Portland haulers don't want to landfill any of the recycling stream. But if you wanted to do that, who would you have to get permission from?
So right now, what happens is the Portland haulers collect the material, then it goes to the processor. The recycled material goes to the processor. It's sorted, and some of that, once it's been deposited with the processor, may go to the landfill. In order for them to do this, they get a concurrence from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality,
DEQ.
and so they are the ones that make that decision.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to testify in this matter? I'm going to close the public hearing and open it for discussion among the commission. Anyone? Do I have a motion? Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Bruce?
Thank you. Am I back on? Thank you, Chair Rudd. And thank you for the discussion today. We are recommending, or we are seeking a recommendation from the commission to send to City Council that reflects the concern that we've outlined on the rates, on the recycling conditions, and recommends that Council will approve the rates as we proposed to the commission.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion? Okay, go ahead, Andre.
So I'm all in favor of the rate increase and everything, but as I said in the last meeting, you need to take some action. So this would be part of the letter. I think this would be approved, but I would like to request that we include in our letter a request to City Council that they prohibit the use of disposable plastic foodware by requiring food service businesses to transition from I gotta get the durable, right? Durable foods, durable to durable and recyclable alternatives by 2020. The rationale here is, as you've heard today, we've heard from our sustainability program. We have a first priority for collection and recycling and doing a lot of things here in Portland. And it's necessary to change our practices and waste generation behaviors to reduce the waste. But we're in a situation where you've heard it's maybe cheaper to just dispose of it than to recycle it. And I come from a manufacturing background where total quality is you eliminate the product first. You don't remanufacture it to make it work. And so it's a small step. Plasticware is not a big item, I'm sure, in the garbage area, but it's a start. And I think it sends a message to our community that if council so foresees, that we are serious about reducing this. Yeah, it may reduce costs, but I don't think we'd ever see the cost reduction because it's not, plasticware is not a big stream item. The other thing that I would ask is that we call for a study to reduce Portland's use of hard to recycle materials. You've heard the cups. Starbucks has offered, I believe it's 10 million or maybe it's $1 million, I'm not sure, on how to replace their cups with something that is recyclable and so, or reusable. So how do we get into that thought process? I think the DEQ is admirable in thinking about how do we find more markets for this, but how do we do something on the front end to reduce or eliminate first the use of the plastic from that standpoint. And then lastly, I would ask that Metro, who collects the tipping fee here and as part of this rate, that they actually have funds that they're looking for alternative markets and for reduction of recycling, and that we ask Metro to grant us some dollars to help in that study, that we get some money from them to go off and do this. Because I think it's important that we show some leadership here about the recycling, that we're serious about it, and that we want to not only reduce it, but eliminate it. And I think the word eliminate is the most important here, because if we don't have to think about whether China takes it back or we find somebody else that's willing to take our dirty waste, if you will, that just seems to be a shell game at at some point they're going to go, this is not good for us, and then we're back into the same boat. If we eliminate it, we don't have to worry about whether China or any other country or ourselves are able to use dirty waste. We don't have it in the first place, and that's more efficient, cost effective, and will be long term a better benefit for our ratepayers on this issue.
Chris?
So seeking to better understand and maybe expand on your suggestion, Andre, you used a term of art for what you wanted to eliminate. In the real world, does that mean clamshells? Does it also mean plastic cutlery? What's included in that?
It would mean, this is not original. This is following a whole bunch of other cities that have already done this, and I looked at similar kind of language. It is specifically because you say serviceware. It's not clamshells. It's basically plastic forks and knives and
Sporks.
Huh?
Sporks.
Sporks. And would be straws. That would kind of be it.
Okay.
The plastic clamshells are, because you say serviceware, as I understand it, at least from other cities. I don't know what the city attorney would say here, but they're not serviceware.
So your proposal would not ban those?
It would not ban.
Okay.
I'm not going to say I know how the city attorney would interpret that. I just look at what other cities have done, and those have not been in that conversation.
Okay. So I want to follow up on that with Bruce. So some of my favorite establishments use serviceware and containers that are marked as compostable, but I don't believe are allowed in the city's composting program. Is there a way to get more compostable materials that we can process and sort of divert into that waste stream, which is presumably more beneficial than landfilling? So where are all the dynamic trade-offs here?
That's it's a challenging issue, and I had a brief conversation with Andre yesterday on this very topic. And the so-called compostable plastics, we had to remove them from our commercial compost program 3.5 years ago. Why is that? Because they don't break down as advertised in Oregon compost facilities. And our material, most of the commercial material that generated in commercial establishments currently gets sent to an anaerobic digestion facility down in the Willamette Valley. That facility will not use those. It screens them off and landfills them. Our residential program has never accepted any of the so-called compostable plastics because Oregon compost facilities can't take those or found that they actually decomposed or added any value to the compost material. So I am very reticent of moving towards a compostable stream, and I know other West Coast cities use that. I have significant questions about the viability of does it actually compost? And then secondly, it's extremely confusing because so many of the plastics look alike. Well, is this compostable? Then you've got more contamination in that stream. And so what compost facilities end up with, and particularly in some of the other areas that have gone this compostable plastics route, is that the facilities have to just screen off all that material because you can't have workers going through a pile and trying to sort it out. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded an answer, but that is not a direction I am supportive of going.
Thank you.
Thus, the word durable versus compostable. That Bruce gave me some good advice there, so that's why I went that way.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was trying not to weigh in, but sometimes I can't resist. I'm reluctant to advise the council on anything much beyond residential rate increases, because that's what our primary objective is. By introducing suggestions about commercial products and sporks and forks and clamshells, I'm not sure we've had a full discussion of that. And it seems to me that's what we need staff to present to us is a full program that we've been hearing. We heard it last year, and we heard it again this time. That we're working on the problem. We need a plan. We need to look forward and figure out what can we do better. And I'm not sure we've been presented with that. And I understand, Andre, your idea may be a great one, but we really haven't aired it. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to be advising council on a commercial change. The one thing we've been hearing, and I sort of put the challenge back to the industry and as well as to you, Bruce, we're all residents who go through this frustration of, can I recycle this thing? Do I throw it away? And we've said this time and time again, and we keep hearing, well, it's a very tricky problem. Well, it may be tricky, but we need some information out to the public. And I'm disappointed we're going to be sending out a rate notice, and we're not going to take advantage of that to also give some explanation. I don't understand why, after all this time, you can't take your best shot at it and do it at the same time you're sending people a rate. We're told now, you said June. I got to tell you, Bruce, and I put the same burden in the industry. Tell us what the hell we're supposed to do, because we've been saying, as everyone does, this. Give us some guidance. And I'm not sure why it's this incredibly difficult process to sit down and draft something and get it out to the people and explain. It changes. Right now, here's what we're telling you, homeowners, residents, tenants. This is what you should be doing. So I would just encourage you to make that a high priority. And that's a first step I think everyone agrees to. And before we get into a next step of what products do we ban, or I don't know what that might be, but I would just encourage us, if we do anything in our letter to City Council, to urge, that's the priority as a first step that I think everyone's asking for. So that's my thought on what we might add to the letter and encourage the industry and your team, Bruce, to get on.
Okay. Any other? Eli?
This might be follow up on a what to put in the letter idea, because I'm supporting this increase as proposed, is to use it. My understanding is that at least for 15, maybe 20 years, Portland has received part of the Metro tipping fee tax. You can tell me if I'm getting this right. And that's helped fund programs at this bureau, the Sustainability Bureau, for ages, to help encourage Portlanders to recycle more and to do market transformation and things like that. So I think I'm saying that correctly, because I know people who've sort of worked in the bureau doing that work, and I'm guessing their salaries are paid in some way through the Metro tipping fee. So I guess I'd be curious if staff has, on the sustainability side of this bureau, has current initiatives that need a good boost, that this mailing outreach would be a way of saying, we're increasing rates, and here's the program we're working on to try and get people to change their practices. How people can help be part of the solution might be part of the outreach.
Eli, you're correct. The waste reduction grants that we receive and have received for the past 20 plus years from Metro, it's distributed on a population basis throughout the region to all the local governments to help fund our programs, including staffing. So we work very closely with Metro along those lines, and I believe it's a successful relationship in that regard. Andre is bringing up a new grant program that Metro is establishing, really trying to kind of get beyond some of those issues that might get into some new business coming in and seeking to establish some activities that have not been undertaken to date. So they're trying to carve out some new area there. But we work and have received substantial funding on a regular basis. And if I may, Jeff, I appreciate the get on it message. And we have we are, I, I'm working with my communications team about the purpose of how we message this rate increase, and we don't want to get it just blamed on recycling. Some of the other messages that have been put out in other parts of the state, I think, get a little muddled. That we intend to identify that the cause is primarily recycling costs, but we don't want to hide that in a bigger explanation of how better to recycle, and we intend to follow that up. In other words, they'll get a rate notice in May, and in June they'll get the more detailed analysis. So, you, I will say that I know I'm going to be taking this back to communications team. Guess what we heard today? So I appreciate it.
Andre?
And just in response to Jeff, the issue of, yeah, we haven't had the hearing. So I would be willing to say we ask council to send it back to us to have the hearings, to have the study, to have the information, and give them a recommendation on this issue so that we do have an airing from the residential and the commercial businesses, mainly commercial businesses that have the issue with the elimination, and that council directs us to do that process and come back to them with a recommendation.
Just so I understand what you're suggesting, you've got this one-off idea, I'll call it, about durable product, durable, whatever you called it, clams and forks. And that, it seems to me you have some good background, and that may be a smart move for the city. I'm wondering, though, are we waiting for sort of a menu of ideas from the solid waste staff, or are we just kind of, hey, you know a good idea, let's go for it? I'm just trying to understand how we're grappling with how do we improve the overall, recycling solid waste system.
This idea is, this is certainly not new. When you look at the West Coast, when I was doing the research on this, there's a whole list of cities that they all had pretty much the same verbiage about this issue. No one has gone, maybe one city that I remember has gone much further than this because of this issue. But I don't know whether staff is coming back with a whole suite, but it seems a way, if we can get council to direct us to look at this issue holistically, then, maybe plasticware is one of the suite of issues that we take a look at.
I just thought I heard there's sort of some planning effort going on between the city and the private sector about how do we do all this better?
And the state, yes.
And the state. Okay. So I don't know, are we going to see recommendations in the next 6 months? Or just trying to sort of balance your idea on it with what do we...
So we're coming up on the end of our time for this hearing, so I want to make sure we stay on that. Procedurally, are you just looking for a consensus for what would be in the letter, or are you trying to amend the motion?
No, I'm just looking for a consensus of what would be in the letter.
Okay, and Mike?
Well, another approach would be to direct staff to undertake that effort and come back to us.
We are more than willing to work on that basis and come back on the what Andre has raised in a little broader context around some of the recycling market issues, and particularly the disposable items.
So, Andre, does that address your concern, or do you want us to check on whether there's a consensus to include your 3 bullets in the letter?
I will say this. I'm good with Bruce coming back. I don't want it open-ended, though, and I will go to council and say that staff is going to come back, and so get ready. We're going to be coming to you with a series of recommendations to tee them up.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask for a nod of heads. Is there a consensus to include the 3 items in the letter? 1, 2, 3.
And we're directing staff.
I'm okay with that. Mine was an alternative.
No, that's what I thought. We were
So
just
directing
Rather
staff,
than
it's
getting
not in the letter.
letter.
Okay. All right.
Get a
So,
report back.
all right.
So we can present you with a framework of a letter that we can send to the officers for.
So we'll
I'm
take
taking
a
these
vote. Okay.
Can I
on
suggest
the rates.
I love your idea of talking to the communications team. We could direct them to talk to the communications team to, in letting Portland residents know about this rate change. Also, let them know whatever their staff and communication team thinks are the best practices to further improve our recycling rates, so that we don't have escalation in the future, and let, I guess, rely on their expertise to recommend items rather than circling back to us
Okay.
for feedback.
So I think we have consensus to direct staff to come back to us with responses to the concerns you've heard this afternoon. To vote on the motion that was to approve the proposed rates. Julie, can you call the roll?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So the next item is a briefing
Thank you
on.
very much.
Thank you. And a briefing on the enhanced transit corridors. Break? Okay. How long a break are we taking? 3 minutes.
3-minute break.
Keep it moving.
Thank you. Mauricio, you want to speak?
Good afternoon. Here we go. Mauricio Leclerc with Portland Bureau of Transportation. I'm here with.
April Bertelson, Senior Transportation Planner with People.
We also have Kelly Betteridge from TriMet in the back and Dan Bauer from Portland Streetcar, if needed. This reminds us that this is a transit. We're talking about transit today, and transit is a partnership. It's a regional thing. It's a regional system. So we've been working, and we're very thankful for the work that Metro, Streetcar, and TriMet have provided to date. Today, we're going to present you our third leg of the stool. We were here 2 times before. Last time it was June 13th. Before that, it was March 14th. So last time, if you recall, we presented to you the elements of the plan where we were at the time. We had ideas for transit. We understood the corridors that mattered, what the reliability issues were, and we wanted to invest more. And we presented to you an RTP transit vision, and we asked you to endorse it so that we submit it to the RTP. We have done that. And we've continued to work, especially April from our end, and to have these regional conversations. And actually, I think all of the lines, all of the TC lines, are actually now at play at Metro as part of the regional transportation plan. So, and furthermore, we actually with TriMet and Metro, we're working into implementing some of these. We've developed a regional ETC program that April's going to touch on. So basically, we've made a lot of progress since we last. We're here. So we're here basically now to present you with the final elements of the plan, and we're going to go to council soon, so we want an endorsement from you on that, but also to show you that as the plan ends, we're just taking off in terms of implementation. So we're going to be touching on both of those elements. So the quick summary we'll say is that the element and what ties it all together is the need for Portland to take a more active role in supporting transit. Transit is stuck. The buses rely on our right of way. And it's up to us, like other jurisdictions are doing, to create more space and make it a priority so that transit service, now and into the future, can continue to be an attractive choice for Portlanders, and so we can meet our goals, and most split goals, which are the foundation for our town plan that you recently approved. So with that introduction, there's a lot more detail in a PowerPoint presentation from April. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity, Commission members, to present to you. If there are questions along the way, particularly clarifying questions, I would welcome those, but otherwise we'll wait for discussion at the end. So just to reiterate, we wanted to present a summary of the draft Enhanced Transit Corridors plan. We are in the process of, we just received public comment. You can consider a part of that engagement as well. And then we'll be revising the plan this month and then coming back out with a final recommended draft that we would take to council hopefully in May. So we'd welcome your feedback on both the content of the plan as we are revising, as well as then we'd like to seek your support in a letter of support to council. Understand that if you want to wait to write that letter until you see the final plan, but we did want you to have the opportunity to present to you as we're still in draft mode. And wanted to highlight this is not the only effort that we are engaged in around transit. We are here today to talk about how do we make transit faster, more reliable, and that is primarily focused on the frequent service network, TriMet's frequent service network, both existing and planned. But we also have other efforts in which we're working with TriMet on improving a service that is less than frequent and getting to frequent, and where there is not yet service, adding service. And we put that more on the side of the growing transit communities. We have a plan that provides somewhat of a format for doing that, where we would make investments in access and safety around transit to remove barriers and work with TriMet around increasing service and making progress on that. So I don't want you or others to think that the only thing that we're focusing on right now is enhanced transit, but it is a piece of the puzzle, all of which are in service to making transit service better and growing transit ridership. So the purpose of this plan is really to improve transit reliability, travel time, and capacity. Those are the three key things. But we're hoping that through this plan, we will identify where transit priority improvements and treatments and streamlining and access could be most beneficial on that plan, TriMet Frequent Service Network within Portland. And we are doing this because we do believe that such improvements will help make transit more attractive, reliable for people to get to where they need to go, whether that is work, school, or daily needs, but particularly for people who depend on transit as their primary mode. In all of this, as I said, goal is to increase transit ridership and improve the experience of current riders. And doing that by making a more dependable TRIMP, where buses where people can arrive to their destination on time, have a faster trip overall, but also that they aren't waiting for buses, and so the bus arriving more on time, and reduce pass-bys for passengers. All of these which contribute to a poor reliability. And we do believe that all this is in service to our equity goals as a city by focusing on transit in general, but particularly the more we can make transit faster and reliable, those people who depend most on that, maybe people who have, they're working shifts, they have to punch a clock. Being late has serious implications. And so we want to do more that they can rely on transit to get to work on time or school. And also that the faster we can make trips, that is also in service to people who have longer trips. And as we know, with affordability pressures and affordability crises, really, people are living further from work and further out. And so if we can help make those transit trips, even if they are longer, make them quicker, that's in service to them. And all of this, we do believe, is in support of planning and supporting the planned growth from the Comprehensive Plan 35. And so we worked first from the growth scenarios that are part of the Comp Plan 35, as well as in service to the policy and goals in the plan. So we're really proposing a shift to better support transit. We are, through this planning process, defining what enhanced transit is and building a toolbox of treatments to help achieve faster, more reliable transit, identifying where it's most needed, and also establishing an ongoing program to help define what success looks like, and to have this be a dynamic process of ongoing improvements. And so this would help to guide and prioritize our investments. And we're also seeking to forge deeper partnership and coordination with TriMet. We already have those partnerships. We want to take this to another level. And also to just help make transit riders count as a part of all of this, and more of that to come. Why this plan? I did talk about this some when we were here last, so this will be a bit of a refresher. I'll try to go through quickly, but we can certainly go back if there's questions. But fundamentally, we think we need to do more to support transit. Buses are a workhorse of the transit system. There are bus lines that are carrying as many riders as MAX lines and streetcar lines as well. And so you can see up there that the Line 4, the Line 72, the Line 20, and the Line 75 are all in the top 10. We're working to improve transit on the Line 4 with the Division Transit Project, but we think more needs to be done in more places. Transit ridership is not growing adequately to support growth or meet our goals for mode share 25% by 2035. And it's been remaining at about 12% since the year 2000 to 2014. And more recently, we're seeing trends of transit ridership dropping. And if you want to know more about that, Katie, I was looking at you. Kelly Betteridge with TriMet does have some additional slides we could pull up at the end if there's we want to know more about transit ridership trends. In addition, buses are getting stuck in traffic and they are slower. So this chart is showing the trend over multiple years since 2009, where the transit speeds are just dropping, which means trips are taking longer. We do believe that a major part of that is because transit is getting stuck in congestion. And this map here shows in red or in orange where the buses are slowest, most difference and slowed down during peak congested times versus a more free flow time of day. And it's a regional problem, we believe as well, based on this data. So more on how we need a regional solution to come. But this is part of our motivation of how can we get buses not stuck in traffic. More reasons. New growth is happening in areas that need better transit. Major capital projects take a long time to build, and we think we need some solutions sooner, faster, tactical. And there's limited resources, so we need to prioritize. So what is enhanced transit? We see it being in the middle of the spectrum of transit that we have in the region. And on that spectrum is that which is mostly local serving and in mixed traffic. The spectrum to that which is an exclusive guideway and carrying more people and usually a longer regional trips on the other side of the spectrum. And so enhanced transit being in the middle could be buses and streetcar, and it could be in a mix of traffic or with some transit priority treatments to give it an edge up or its own transit lane in some circumstances too. Characteristics, things that increase capacity, reliability, and transit travel speed. That's our mantra. But through moderate capital and operational investments that are flexible and context sensitive and can be deployed relatively quickly, and that it can include bus and streetcar. In fact, we've already started deploying some of these treatments on our streetcar lines. And that it can take different shape. An enhanced transit treatment or project may just be addressing a hot spot. It may be a series of spots along a corridor or a line, a segment of a line, or it could be a full line. It could be spots that are across the network to improve the network as a whole, or more focused in one line, or serve multiple lines. So it really could, the shape of an enhanced transit project could vary greatly, but we want to start from the ground up where the problem is and then shape projects to fit that and whatever resources, opportunity we have. We developed a toolbox, as I mentioned, and this is also available on the website. I think I shared it last time of different kinds of tools for different places. So just to highlight a couple of those, dedicated bus lane, which would provide exclusive use for buses. Another is the business access and transit lane, or BAT lane, as we say for short. And this is more of a shared space where buses have the priority, but local other vehicles can use it for local access, whether that's to access a driveway in that block or to make a turn, a right turn, except bus treatment. But transit would be able to be the only through moving vehicle in a BAT lane. Another examples are pro-time transit lanes, which is where it would be a bus-only lane during the peak period when it's most needed to get around congestion, and it could be something else in the off, such as on-street parking. An example here in Southeast Madison approaching the Hawthorne Bridge, where we have that today. And other variations includes queue jumps or the right turn except bus treatment that I mentioned. So that's the why we're enhanced and what is enhanced transit. And I wanted to move to the key elements of our draft enhanced transit corridors plan. Really three-prong. One, policies to support transit, as well as some action items and next steps to help move us forward. And two, wanted to highlight recommendations to make transit the preferred mode for trips over 3 miles citywide. Currently, it's walking for a mile or less, or for biking up to 3. And then the other would be to make space and time in the right-of-way for enhanced transit, fundamentally, to help us make those priorities. The other prong is strengthen and ongoing monitoring of frequent service lines. And so I'll have a few slides about the ongoing monitoring program. And the third prong is to develop 20-year regional transit vision with a strong ETC component and nimble implementation. So within that, we have a set of projects, which we already have submitted to the Regional Transportation Plan project list. We will, with this plan, be recommended that those projects be added to the transportation system plan, as well as to work to accelerate implementation of enhanced transit treatments, both in small and large form, and work to identify new funding sources. And so we're making the case for why we need to do this now. And the other part of that is to also increase transit service. We want to see more frequency on the street. So on the ongoing monitoring program, since we last saw you, this is more of a new element we've been fleshing out. And so we are looking to partner with TriMet on sharing data and coordinating monitoring of transit performance. And looking at both the frequent service planned and current for streetcar and buses. And that we would then be looking for opportunities to actively manage the right-of-way and support enhanced transit improvements, and working together with TriMet to implement those and make the improvements both in reliability and in service. And this map is showing you that network of where it is already frequent service and where there is planned frequent service based on TriMet service enhancement plans. So the fundamental framework and goal of an ongoing monitoring program is to intervene where where reliability and speed are declining, and so have a monitoring, establishing guidelines for a range of service that we'd want to see, a desired level of service, and a level of service we want to avoid. Monitor the system, identify when segments or lines are dipping below that, and then that be a call to talk and take action. So then we would work with TriMet on what can we do to make improvements, implement those, continue monitoring to see where we have made improvements and reach success. And as new problems arise, those would continue to pop up on our monitoring screen. And so I have many performance measures that we are looking at and recommending to continue using in the Enhanced Transit Corridors Plan. But there are two that we're highlighting right now that would be sort of our priority monitoring, our first tier of monitoring measures and then we use these to help us then go figure out where to go deeper and do more diagnostic measuring. And one is measuring passenger delay. And this is looking at what is the amount of time that a bus is delayed in traffic, taking that measure of bus delay, if you will, or transit delay, and then multiplying it by how many people are on the bus so that we're making all of the people count. It's not just the bus stuck in traffic, it's people stuck in traffic, right? And so measuring that in the number of minutes of passenger delay to help us understand where is the need greatest and we could prioritize focusing our efforts. And then also using that and thinking about the trade-offs that we might need to make in reallocating space and time in the right-of-way. But fundamentally making all the transit riders count. Another more wonky measure that we're looking at is transit runtime variability. And so this would be measuring day-to-day variability of each bus trip and from end to end of a bus run. And that is both impacting the riders who are waiting for the bus or late getting to their destination and don't know day-to-day how long it's going to take. But it's also very challenging for TriMet to schedule and operate lines that have great variability. And they end up needing to expend more resources to make sure their operators get the breaks they need at the end of the line and that they don't start late on the next run. So they have to build in extra time. We want to turn that around and have that be added to frequency over time. So instead of just spending more to maintain the same schedule, we're getting more frequent schedule. And so that's what can we do to make it more efficient for TriMet to operate, as well as more reliable for the transit riders. Then this is the measure at a whole line level that we would be looking at. So just I guess to dwell on that for a moment, we'll be using these measures to help us on an ongoing basis identify where priority investment or where priority interventions and then use that to prioritize investments, as well as additional measures to help us diagnose what kind of treatments could help address and make improvements. The other third prong that I talked about is the 20-year vision for transit. And this here, we showed this when we were here in June previously, and so more of an update to let you know that this continues to be a part of our plan. It guided our regional transportation plan project submittal and will then guide what we recommend to be added to the transportation system plan in a future update. And the orange lines are the enhanced transit element of this, that initial network that we're including in the vision and in our plans. And this is that same elements on the map, but then put into timeframes based on the initial submittal for the RTP project list, the 1 to 10 year constrained versus 11-20, and then a strategic, which is more the unconstrained. And we'll try to use this to also help assess which time frame we should put in for the transportation system plan. But to be clear, this plan is not amending the TSP at this time. We're making recommendations that would be a part of a future TSP amendment, and that's when you would see this again. There's that lovely cycle between RTP and TSP. So next you'll see this in a future TSP update. So then thinking a step forward to as we move into implementation, I want to highlight that we want to establish an ethos where we are guided by policy and informed by data, including transit data. And as we go into areas that what we propose is context sensitive, but we are considering the reallocation of space and time within the right-of-way to better serve transit, while also thinking about how we make complete streets. And that measuring passenger delay, I think, will be a part of helping to balance those benefits and weigh them. One of those guiding policies we want to highlight is TSP Policy 9.6, the strategy for people movement and the hierarchy here, and that this being a foundation from which we would work to make decisions in the right-of-way. And then next I wanted to highlight some early implementation where we are not waiting until plan adoption. We've already are starting to try to make enhanced transit improvements. So I want to highlight a couple of those. We have a transit priority spot improvement program, which is one of our, I believe, 7 TSP programs. And last year we I wanted to highlight two improvements being made, one to the line 12 on Northeast Sandy approaching 72nd Avenue, and one on lane 14 on 50th approaching Powell. Low cost improvements where we were able to remove some on-street parking and allow for the bus to jump around the queue and have a right turn except bus, and then it would pull into the bus stop on the far side of the intersection. And so we are monitoring what improvement we're getting from these now. Another highlight, and this is more of an upgrade to the bicycle facility on Southeast Morrison, where we had an existing pro-time bus lane, bat lane between Southeast 11th and Grand approaching the Morrison Bridge. This shows where we can make an improvement to the bike facility as well and still have transit and bike working together. And we will continue to look at improvements in this segment. Another project we recently installed was a business access or transit lane slash queue jump approach on the on West Burnside approaching the Burnside Bridge. We started this during construction with the Morrison Bridge and the Burnside Bridge, but we are deciding to keep this. So any additional improvements we look would be start from this as a base. This is not just during construction. But helps the bus to get around the queue. Coming soon, we are implementing a business access and transit lane on Southeast Grand and Northeast Grand, but on Grand Avenue between Southeast Ankeny and Northeast Everett, which is where the I-84 on-ramp. So this will help the bus to get through some of the congestion building up at Burnside and at Everett to the
And streetcar.
and for bus and streetcar, be very clear. This will both benefit our streetcar loop and the Line 6. And in addition, and moving forward, so over this last year, we have been advocating for and really happy to be supporting the development of a regional ETC pilot program being led by Metro and TriMet. And we do have representatives from Metro and TriMet here that can speak more to this. And that we see this as a step to help us advance into implementation so excited to be participating in it. This pilot is also in support to the regional transit vision that is in development now, and that vision is to make transit more frequent, convenient, accessible, and affordable for everyone. Yes?
What does that stand for?
I'm sorry, the question again.
Enhanced transit.
ETC. Oh, enhanced transit.
Yeah, although in this enhanced transit concept is what they're using for ETC.
Okay.
So.
Is it the same? I mean, are they using the same?
Same
Are
goals.
they using the same definitions and everything? Are they calling it something different?
Yes, generally they're the same goals, same kinds of treatment and toolbox. So yes, similar.
Okay.
Evolving name, I guess you could say. It's just
We share the brand.
yes. And this is in support of larger regional plans, climate smart strategy, certainly our 2040 growth concept, and TriMet service enhancement plans. The goals of the pilot program of Enhanced Transit Concept is to improve transit reliability, speed, and capacity, just as our local plan. It's a similar goal. But they are looking to identify, design, and build a set of enhanced transit projects, ideally within 2 years. So trying to move fast and be tactical and demonstrate this in the region and address needs that really, we've been long needing, and to also develop a pipeline of enhanced transit projects. So this is an opportunity to do project development as well as build some projects. Working with the Metro and TriMet led the effort to identify the candidate segments across the region that will be eligible for submittal to the regional pilot program. And they used criteria that were similar to the criteria that we initially used, but a slight different bend. But they were looking at where is there delay, stuck in congestion, where is their dwell time, and where is ridership high. And so this map displays those segments that are outside of the central city that are now eligible for the pilot. And many of them are within Portland. And then, I'm going to jump to this map here shows the segments within the central city. And some of the highest scoring segments were really here, where there are segments that have a lot of delay and high ridership coming into or out of the central city, and multiple bus lines on some of these segments. So that really increases their score. Moving back, we are looking at these segments for opportunities that we could then advance into the pilot program, and opportunities where we can integrate this into planning processes. And that's where I did want to highlight that we have a 122nd Avenue plan that we are launching now to improve safety, access, and transit. And while that is to develop a multimodal conceptual plan and identify any cross sections, we're also going to be looking for opportunities to integrate enhanced transit into the project. And we have some initial seed funding to then build something through our Fixing Our Streets program, and we'll be looking for additional funding. So we're on the very beginning of that planning process, but we're happy to come back in the future to talk about it more, should you desire. In terms of these segments, we are in the process of identifying which of the segments from those two maps to advance to submit to Metro to be a part of this regional pilot program for additional evaluation and project development, and then some subset of those projects may advance to construction. And the timeline generally is we're looking to submit in June. The pilot program will accept segments up in May and June. And then they will be advancing to develop those hopefully to 15% and by December, and then a touch point to then look at which ones advance beyond that for more into design and construction. But those that advance to 15%, that's helping us in project development as well. And then in terms of next steps overall, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight that we have been doing outreach. We had a public open house in February. We had an online survey that just closed recently. And I also visited a number of stakeholder groups, and this is a list of those. We'll continue to do so. And then we are shifting into a revised mode for the draft plan and release a final recommended plan later this month. And then hope to schedule a council hearing in late May to recommend adoption, and then submit the regional pilot segments that are recommended to Metro in June. And then ongoing efforts around implementation. And that's the end of my presentation. I identified a couple of questions or a couple of topics I thought that we might cover in the discussion, but really whatever you'd like to talk about, we're here. Thank you.
Okay, so we have this set on the agenda till 2:15, and we're clearly coming up on that. Can people stay till 2:30? Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
So a few points. First of all, very supportive. This is great work. Thank you very much. You mentioned the Southeast Morrison example. Are there other tools in the toolkit that have co-benefits for people walking and biking?
There are different station designs that can have improved benefit for, particularly for cycling, but for organizing around interactions between people walking, biking, and the transit vehicle and people taking transit. So in that, there are some tools that can do that, such as the island and having bikes go around. There, in addition to, another would be having and some of these are building on things we're doing, the bike lane on the opposite side of the street of the bus. So certainly we've done that, and well, streetcar, Broadway Widler is an example of that, but also more recently Williams. So those are some examples of that.
Okay, a couple comments. Really appreciate the use of person delay as a way to put evidence behind our modal strategy for people movement. I think that's a great step forward. And putting on my streetcar board member hat, really looking forward to the bat lane on Grand. That's been a pinch point for us since we opened the loop. So really hoping that we can get much better on-time performance and reliability through that. Thank you.
And that is clearly the place where streetcar gets stuck significantly. So.
Okay, Ben.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you for what looks like great work. I like the versatility and the flexibility this offers. You can address specific problem points, maybe look at it at a wider scale, quarter, or perhaps even more at a system level. And I particularly like the idea of the toolbox that you can just pull out and adapt to all these various situations there. So it's a very context sensitive type of approach. My question is, do you have adequate forecasting or modeling tools to really predict what the best case, what's the best tool to use for any of these specific situations? I would venture that sometimes it may not be that clear. You may have to have some, and I guess the second part of the question is, does this system allow enough flexibility to adjust and tinker with the system? Is it BAT? Is it bus only? Which one would work best in some very specific situations? How much flexibility is there in that system?
There are tools that can be used to do those assessments, and we could be looking to do those during the implementation phase. I think one, to understand the benefit to transit of one treatment versus another, as well as to understand the impact if there is an increased delay. Traffic modeling. We are looking into more and more interested in traffic modeling tools that help us to understand the transit side of things, not just the vehicle side of things. And there are tools, and we're learning about more tools. In fact, I think Metro recently shared with us a dynamic meso modeling tool that we're interested in.
So as part of these workshops, we learn a lot about what the problems are and what tool that applies. Having a big toolbox helps. Also, the performance measures we showed you is a way to highlight which line is doing worse. It's basically the question is, this patient needs to go to the hospital. So once we find out a line that we agree that it really needs work, then it goes through another track, which is, okay, what can we do about it? And TriMet has more data, more information, and we have, engineering tools to begin to blend it and figure out what actually helps. In that case, it could be removing a stop, put it in the far end, a transit priority lane, bad lane, signaling, queuing, queue jumping stuff. So I think we have a broad tool. The broad tool helps us, but the important thing that we're trying to do now is set up a framework so that we know when to act and how to do that and which lines to matter to us most. Mm-hmm.
But I would say in terms of our identifying that first initial, that monitoring and identifying where the need is, we are basing that off of transit operational data so it is looking at the last quarter or year of transit data to help to identify where the problem is, but then in terms of the treatment and solution, they could be those other tools.
A follow-up question. In terms of public outreach, what are some of the themes that have been emerging?
Good questions. So I would say they take a few different themes. One, be bolder, do more, do it faster, fund it. So I would, a lot of enthusiasm and saying, it's not enough, go more. There are a minority of voice that we've heard that are concerned about the impacts to vehicle traffic. Um, and then there are some who their concerns. We hear about the concerns that they have in the transit system that are not addressed in enhanced transit, but are more, I would say, akin to our growing transit community's needs. So it's where they don't have service and they want service, or they don't have enough service to get frequent service. So we're taking that comment as well, but I acknowledge that we are hearing that. And then I would some things around the nuances of measures that we are looking to use, and but the biggest is probably more, faster, bolder. Eli.
Well, I like this process a lot. Also, you go through my head a little bit. That's pretty left brain, and I know that people make real decisions based on like behavioral economics, right brain stuff. And I'm just wondering where within Peabody or TriMet are. I'll just toss out a couple ideas that made me think of. One is in the utility world, you have 100 apartments all sharing one water bill that's paid for by the owner. How do you get them to conserve water? Well, one way is to pay big water bills. The other is to give them a pizza party every time the water bill comes in under a certain amount, and that turns out to be a much more cost-effective way. I know that in times in the transit world, I've lived in Eugene, and they base it a free system during, Oregon Country Fair, or in Portland, they've done that when temperatures get over 90 or they have poor air quality days. So even if you have a transit pass, you feel appreciated when that happens. You're doing the right thing. I mean, maybe Portland, if they get over 90 degrees on bad quality days, you get 50 cents off ice cream, in exchange for your pass, and you work a little deal. I mean, just to think of ways that I know that one is people do respond to that. The accessory dwelling unit world, you can have great regulations, but if people actually tour them, that's when they actually go about building them. So I know it's a pretty well studied area, and I see that there. I guess my hope is that I'm not expecting this from this presentation, that there is work going in that direction to try and respond to the reasons people sometimes really do make decisions separate from time and cost. So I just wanted to leave. Maybe if this is already happening in some other area within Peabody or TriMet, I'd be curious.
We do have a program that Smart Trips that is trying to incentivize people to take transit. Also, so that's one track that we'll continue to use. The second one is, as you know, we've been talking about PBM for a while. So we have a link now in which we can say, as new growth happens, we want you to a little bit of money gets set aside so that when you first move to a new unit, you have the option of having a transit pass. So establish a new behavior. So those are two examples that come to mind. But as you say, it's an ongoing conversation. We're welcome to ideas.
I think in the spirit of your comment as well, the Mobile Streetcar Fest is one of those activities where we're celebrating transit and making people think about it differently. Yeah, Katie?
I have a bunch of questions from as you went through. I was making little notes. So just real quick, what is the Growing Transit Communities report going to be? What is that plan about? Just quickly.
That plan we did take to council last year, and it is more focused on a plan of priority improvements to remove barriers and improve access and safety improvements along 3 lines that are planned for frequent but not yet frequent.
Okay, I think
you remember.
yeah, now I'm remembering it. Okay, thank you.
I gave you a quick briefing on it last year before we
Uh-huh.
went to council, but it was looking at the segments of the line 20, particularly Outer Stark, segments of line 87 along Airport Way, east of I-205, and segments of the, oh my gosh, line 77 on Halsey.
That's okay. No, that's fine.
But
And-
that being a model for us to think about other places where.
Okay, I just was trying to fit the things together. And then the other thing was you were talking about frequent service. Is there more than one category? Is there frequent service and then a middle category and a lower category, or is there just frequent service and everybody else?
So,
I think it's the latter.
Yeah, frequent or other, and frequent being 15
Okay,
minutes.
frequent or other. Okay, and then because I noticed that 148th is a new line, and and there's been a lot of discussion in East Portland about how they want more frequent service and weekend service, and TriMet has been taking the usual path of having it build, and we've been asking that it that they be more aggressive. And so I just was wondering, just wanted to mention that. And then on the measures, so these 3 measures that you are doing with transit run variability and passenger delays, and you said that they would trigger something. Is that a Portland? Are those going to be Portland measures, or are those going to be new TriMet measures?
I think it's fair to say that those would be Portland measures that we're proposing and to monitor, but we'd be working with TriMet on processing those. The data, it's their data, and they would be helping us to calculate that. But it's not TriMet adopting them. It is Portland.
Okay, and so you're going to be getting the data from them.
Yeah, we are. We've been using their data, and we're working together to come up with this measure. Yeah.
Okay, and so
and actually the development of those measures.
Is there going to be a little bell somewhere that rings when it triggers or something? I would know that wouldn't be the case, but what happens then if it gets triggered?
It would be the first step for us to, I think of it as like the trigger to talk. So as we see which segments are crossing a threshold, we would, together with TriMet, start to look at those segments, look more closely with other measures to do more diagnostics and understand more of what the nature of the delay was and what tools might be appropriate, look at the context, see what fits, come up with proposed investment plans or treatment plans, and then evolve those towards refining and implementation and funding. But that it won't be as if it's instantly trigger.
Yeah, the bell doesn't go off. Yeah,
yeah, but it'll help bring things to our attention and know that we need to.
Would it be you two that it would come to, or I mean,
the idea would be
because a lot of times you do. Yeah. Somebody will set something like this up, and then it kind of over time it can kind of peter out.
It's a good question. We are attempting to wrap up the plan, but also start a new transit program within PBOT, beef it up. We have a TSP transit program. With a little bit of money, we don't quite have the staffing to be able to do it. We've been able to ensure, the improvements that you saw, from April to present. That's what we can do. We need to do more quicker and in a more systematic way, for which we're establishing a better partnership, a closer partnership with TriMet, using these measures, using the data, and have a common understanding of what the problem is and what the solution is. So that's what. So the example would be if we find on the map that a bus line is being delayed. It has a lot of people, so times people, big delay. And then we also at the same time TriMet is showing us that this bus is consistently leaving late, and we had to add more bus service. You add the two together, that's a line in which we need to talk about. And then we figure out a solution, and hopefully that service, that extra bus that is being put on the line 20 or something, can now be used to provide better frequency, and better service to customers.
Okay. But on the staff level, we are still working out the team, how much staff time that's going to need to take on an ongoing basis. How do we grow our funding? One of the recommendation actions is to increase funding for the priority program. So that's staff capacity, but it's also to make the physical improvements.
So, right, exactly. So that when the bell rings, somebody's able to actually do something about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. And have you already presented, or is this in the future? This cries out for a project list. Have we seen a project list?
You're right. And there is in the plan in the recommendations chapter tables with lists of projects that are based on the RTP projects. And so the idea would be to translate those into projects to add to our transportation system plan. So we do have lists of projects that are based on the map. We can just... So based on these maps here, and they're organized into different time frame tiers. And some of those projects are submitted by TriMet and with our support, and some are submitted by PBOT. And then they show up in the RTP project lists.
Okay, so they are in the RTP project list. So I always like to see them, but if you've already presented them, I mean...
Yeah, they're in the plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
and if you want, I do have a couple copies here. I'd be happy to leave a copy of
That'd be
the
great.
plan. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a next round of call for projects. So if there's an opportunity that we need to refine a project in here, now is a good time for us to get that feedback.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Teresa?
Good job on the plan. It looks exciting. So I just have a question. Is the subway a Portland project or a TriMet project, or what is that all about?
At this
Just in
point,
brief.
yeah, be very brief. It's an idea, it's a concept that we can advance to the RTP, not funded, not within the fundable list, but the strategic part. It responds to the need to better connect the region, and based on TriMet analysis, in the next 20 years, we're going to be having hard time making the system work with the added congestion, with the added lines. It's still, we may need to grade separate some east-west movement through the central city, again, to provide that regional connection and also improve operations downtown. So at some point, the choke point, Rose Quarter, Steel Bridge, we're flagging a long-term solution, which, in in other cities, it typically is going underground, but it could be above ground, whatever, it's grade separated. So that's the concept. There's a vision part of it. There's a technical rationale for it, So,
but further analysis
Further
needed
analysis,
to determine what the answer and improvement is.
Andre?
I will be quick. Just on the TSP, so are these the projects that Art described in the last round there was a holding point for what was coming out of the enhanced, so it would come into this slot? Or are these projects that are going into that funding spot? So the TSP is not growing in value, it's essentially filling in a placeholder, correct? Or are you adding what I would call new projects that we've not seen?
We're not there yet because we haven't recommended anything to the TSP. I think in this case, we'll be adding projects, I would think. However, by the time the TSP gets adopted, some projects could have been already built, so we need to do a new assessment of funds, versus projects.
So
these are projects we're recommending as an input into that process, and we'll take sorting of which time frame they fit into and funding.
Perfect. So this is you have two things up there. You're going to identify the funding sources and then tie the funding sources to transit ridership. Equity communities have lost out on that battle time and time again because they don't have the ridership. 148th is an example. And it also runs against TriMet's equity policy that they look at changes into the actual, if they're going to add a new line or something, there's an equity policy. And so that seems to be in conflict with that equity policy of if you add a line and you're not compensating in some way to other areas, what happens all the time then is the high frequency line, the high ridership line gets all the benefits and the other lines don't get any benefits. And so you get this inequity. And so I'm interested to see. I love the enhanced transit, but I want to make sure that it's just not going to a certain group of individuals, that it does impact a larger group. And lastly, 3 weeks ago, we had a presentation about value pricing, congestion tolling, whatever you want to call it. And so part of what was presented that ODOT, Metro, and everybody is putting forward is this idea of some kind of tolling. Part of that was there was going to be diversion, significant amount of diversion, and that the mitigation, at least thrown up, was transit, and that was transit for low-income individuals. And I'm trying to understand, have you talked to the folks over in the Metro and ODOT to say, because my understanding, TriMet has said if that comes, they don't have the equipment to do it, and they don't have the time frame and a lot of things. I don't want to be, I don't want to get ahead, but I want to make sure that enhanced transit does not kind of move ahead without thinking about congestion pricing and whether or not transit needs to take on another role that enhanced transit may not be able to fill, or the plans may not be able to fill.
We are certainly thinking about these things together. I would say we're talking often with our staff that's working on this, and you overlap.
As we presented before, we're not there yet. We presented ideas. We haven't quite done the analysis of the trade-offs and diversion and all that. But from the City of Portland perspective, if a way to mitigate that traffic onto local streets, for example, would be, or provide a equitable option on our local streets, would be to enhance transit service. Where does the money come from? There's a conversation about that. The toll itself could pay for it, but this is many steps removed from where we are today. But we are trying, as staff at PIBA, we're trying to connect the two as possibilities.
And I would say that there are some of these lines that are on the enhanced transit and network that parallel potential highway, freeway facilities that could be a part of that pricing. And so perhaps there are some mitigation parallel efforts that are on the transit side. Enhanced transit could be part of that solution.
I guess my concern is that the mitigation that at least ODOT was talking about is for the equity concern. And so that equity concern may not meet the enhanced transit concern.
Okay, so we're at 2:30.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I just want to do a
I don't
check.
need an answer, but I think that's a concern that I have going forward.
I would say last thing that as we developed this map, equity was a key component of the development of the map. So we certainly took the map, or communities of concern, and we overlaid this map, and we feel good that I think it serves the needs to the best of what the program is. Secondly, sometimes, and we heard this, some of the bottleneck, you may live in a certain area, but as you travel through the region, the bottleneck may not be exactly where you live, but the benefit will certainly benefit you if you're trying to get from East Portland across the region and you're stuck in downtown Portland. A benefit in downtown Portland could be the best thing you can do for somebody out there. So it's a complicated network, and we're trying to address it, but it's certainly part of the work that we did as part of BTC.
Yes, and even if you don't travel through downtown or one of those bottlenecks, if you're waiting for the 20 out on Outer Stark to get to Mount Hood Community College, the bus is stuck on the Burnside Bridge, it's a delay to you too. So we're all connected in that sense, the effects of transit delay. But happy to talk more on this topic and others too, if you want.
Okay, I'm going to steal a minute just to make a couple of comments. One, I would think that with the tolling or value, whatever they end up calling it, that the NEPA process would need to consider the impact, and possibly that's where that gets analyzed.
You hope.
Trust the law. And the other just thing I'd throw out is I wonder, in the perfect world, and this is a great plan to me, in the perfect world, we're prioritizing transit and the bus lane, streetcar line, that's all zipping along. I wonder if we are looking at how much slower the things we're not incentivizing the single occupancy vehicle is, to the extent that potentially makes the well-served areas even more attractive and we get more pressure on housing prices. Chris, you had a motion you wanted to add?
Yes.
Well, this is a briefing, so I'm not...
Well,
Sure.
they've asked for endorsement, so I'll phrase as endorsement, I guess. So I would propose that we recommend this plan to City Council with our strong enthusiasm, that we emphasize that this supports the strategy for people movement in the TSP/comp plan, and that we call out the need to apply an equity lens to project selection, particularly with respect to populations that may have been displaced from inner neighborhoods to outer neighborhoods, and sort of fulfilling our duties to those folks.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay.
I'm sorry to take people's time, but I'm curious to hear an answer to the point you raised, Michelle, about when you're looking at the various tools for enhanced transit, I'm thinking particularly BAT lanes or whatever, is there any analysis of what it does to congestion for single occupancy vehicles? I mean, is there, well, one, is there an analysis? And two, is there is there a point where you go, whoa, this is just too much congestion this particular tool is going to create, we're going to scale it back? I mean, how do you balance that?
We anticipate doing that analysis and having some of those conversations during project development, and deciding which tools are the appropriate tools in the different places, and weighing the benefits to transit riders as well as the other impacts.
And the person delay
we'll
metric.
definitely be doing traffic analysis.
The person delay metric gives you an ideal tool to do that, right?
Yeah.
So.
Not all projects may need that level of traffic analysis, but active conversations about how much and when. And certainly our traffic engineers will be engaged.
To understand the length of that bad lane, it's important to understand the congestion of it. And sometimes you taking a lane may actually lengthen the bad lane to a point in which it's not quite feasible. So it's certainly something that we take into consideration very seriously.
While still being guided by our policy, that we may accept higher levels of congestion in places.
Okay, so Andres.
I remember when this was first presented, there was a conversation about the equity considerations in selecting the paths. And I know we recently got a presentation on a gentrification risk map that BPS has developed. And I'm just wondering if there are opportunities for interfacing between the equity tools different bureaus do. So you're doing an equity analysis, BPS is doing an equity analysis, and seeing where those areas overlap and if there are opportunities to combine work. And I don't know the details of each of those, and maybe one has components that the other doesn't. And so I just wanted to flag that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Julie, could you call the roll? We have a second, right? Sure.
I'm going to vote no because I would like to see the list and everything before we go to council the final, but that's neither here nor there.
The list of clarifying, a list of projects, or
the final and the list of projects, because it's going to compete against a current list of vetted TSP projects. But that's me. The future projects that are coming out of RTP.
Oh, okay. So maybe to clarify, I'll make sure you have a copy of the plan with the lists of the projects that were recommended based on the RTP projects, and knowing that we are not yet saying where would they fit into the TSP, but that they be included in the consideration in the TSP update, and figure out where they would fit into different timeframes in our TSP.
So just to clarify that, stuff is only going to get built if it's either funded through the spot improvements, which are a programmatic line in the current TSP, right, which exists, or by amending the TSP, which would force the prioritization process that Andre's talking about, right?
That's a fair assessment, yes. And at this point, we do have a program, so we're implementing things programmatically through that, and then we would be looking to amend some existing TSP projects to add enhanced transit to the description and probably increase the value, the cost of that, or recommend new projects be added where there is not already a current project. We have not done that assessment of what the increased costs above the TSP levels or where they'd fit. That would need to be a part of the TSP update, but it could certainly get you the project list that we're recommending for consideration. And do you think does that help?
The concern is, and this is the concern that through the TSP I've had is, and it really goes back a long ways with East Portland, is when these projects come in from the side like this, East Portland is the loser of projects because they get ranked higher than East Portland projects for a lot of other issues. And so I'm concerned about just when you start re-ranking and looking at some of the matrix you're using, they could get ranked higher in East Portland projects, which are not, were hard-fought battles to get on the list, now drop off, and we're back to square one.
I wouldn't want that to be an outcome, and I would highlight that some of the projects are in East Portland, and the equity measure that we used helped us to prioritize those as well, and so in terms of which ones get prioritized within the TSP, the ones in East Portland versus other, I would anticipate would also taking our TSP criteria helps in prioritizing, and equity is a consideration there as well. So I think we'll have some enhanced transit projects that better serve East Portland, and they are in the mix, and I would hope that they would elevate up when we integrate them in, recommend them and add it to the TSP. But I'm hearing your concern too, so I think that's something for us to a caution for us to bear.
Again, one of the reasons why ETC is taken off internally, but also with the region, is the need that the further out you are from downtown Portland, the better ETC, the more benefit you have. So we're getting that reaction from outside the city of Portland, and I think it is a key driver of us that ETC is definitely helping East Portland by making East Portland more, opening up the region to East Portland, because it will take less time to get there by transit.
And we've missed 2:30, so I want to. Okay. So.
Okay.
Julie, are you ready to call?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Larcell.
Yes.
Feedback.
Yes.
St. Martin. Yes. Red.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.